Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Great to share a spotlight episode now with the one and only Aki Kumar. Aki, thank you so much. This is really a treat for us to have you join us.
Hey, thank you for having me. And I think for this episode, you should probably call it Trust Me. I think I know what I'm doing.
I might know
I
what I'm doing.
might.
I like a lot of people when they first probably learn about you. Did you ever make assumptions, that it takes a certain persona to make blues music?
Nah. No, I didn't. I approached this music from a very pure kind of angle. I liked the music and I wanted to consume more of it. And I wanted to somehow put my musical abilities to use where I could make some of that music. So the
Yeah.
whole stage persona, all of that other stuff, those kinds of factors and perspectives and variables, they only came in later. When I started out, it was really purely for the love of the blues. And that still continues. And that's the best part about my connection to blues.
Yeah. And I mean, in particularly for you, there's a lot of universality from being very specific and in trying to not only share that blues music as a performer, as an artist, and yet also with the very unique background that you have. Do you find that, especially for you, when you are thinking about the blues, when you're making music, when you're actually creating, your art, is there indeed a universality that speaks to that, even though your story is very, very specific and unique?
Yeah, the themes of that blues covers as a genre is no different, quite honestly, than a good song would cover. It's the themes are universal. They're about human emotions, human condition, the human condition. So when you speak of the human condition, that's as universal as it gets. And you can
Yeah.
and you were at my show a few weeks ago, and we sang songs about heartbreak. We sang songs that were romantic, uh, and that's really all there is to it. It appeals, it cuts through all demographics, and that has, to me, explained its longevity. This is why the blues will never die. The blues has been around, and it's going to be around for a long time to come.
Yeah. And I mean, you're sort of a student in that way of the blues. I know you've brought this up in your shows, and I've heard you speak and this written about before. But as a student of the blues, and as each show or each kind of iteration of this manifests itself for you, whether you're in the studio or whether you're up on stage, does being a student lend itself to learning something new about the blues every single time you perform? And if that's the case, I mean, what practically are you learning about the blues on kind of a day-to-day basis?
Oh man, that's a good one. Um, well, so let me first address the student part of it. I mean, it sounds academic when I say I'm a student. Some of
Yeah.
it, a lot of it is in the sense that there's no, blues degree to be like we're Desi, so we're all about
What?
degrees
Yeah, I
and
was going to say, if there was
masters
a
and
blues degree, man, that sign me up. That's
if there was
great.
a blues degree that got you a visa, there'd be a lot more Indians doing the
Yeah,
blues.
that's right.
I almost lost my visa wanting to do the blues, so it's all good.
Yeah.
The thing with the student part of it is the blues is, again, it's a genre that's essentially fundamentally American. It's African American. It goes back. It's deeply tied to the very existence of this country,
Uh,
the United States. And so if you want to truly, absorb the genre and be part of it, you kind of have to study that both musically, historically, and understand where it comes from and what it is. And it has such an incredibly rich recorded history. Since the inception of recording technology, the blues has been recorded. So you're looking at 100+ years of music making that has been made at the highest level by some of the greatest practitioners of this art form. So if you want to start and this is my approach and my philosophy, if you want to start,
yeah.
you have to dig in deep and you have to be a lifelong student, because I haven't consumed even all the prior art that there is in this genre.
Sure.
So that's my approach to it. Then there's the student aspect where you're constantly evaluating your connection to it. And this
Uh,
could be at the macro level, how the whole thing is going, how's your career going, how's your artistry being perceived. It can be at the micro level where every song, I think about a song that I've done today and I go, well, how was I doing it 2 years ago?
Right.
Am I putting more of myself into it? Am I getting hyper technical about this? Is it getting worse?
Right.
Those
Yeah.
aspects.
Right. Right.
So there's, that's why when you ask me the question, it's a much longer answer. We could talk about just that for an hour.
Yeah. No,
It's
you're
endless.
right. And I love how you break that into sort of like there's a background, there's a macro, there's a micro to it. And when you think about it, it sort of is a proxy for any craft, any kind of thing that we do that we're a student of, that we're constantly learning. In your case, I mean, how have your performances and creativity in making blues music as a student, as someone who's studying the micro and the macro part of this, how they also been expressions in a way of your desiness?
Um, there is, well, you were at the show and you saw me do some really what I considered stock blues songs. I was just about to edit a video from that show of a Little Walter song that I loved. One of the first Little Walter songs that I learned. It was, I think, 1953. So this is going way back,
Yeah.
And it was a slow blues number I did called I Can't Hold Out Much Longer. And I did that song wearing a kurta.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Now, this
Blue
is,
kurta.
yeah, a blue kurta. And this is the desiness coming up, right?
Mm.
And I don't wear a dhoti, but what I was wearing was kind of hinting at that, and maybe I will
Yeah.
wear a dhoti someday.
Sure.
So first and foremost, you got this Desi, very obviously Desi guy
Yeah.
presenting a very traditional blues song. So there's that. And although I'm not a classically or Hindustani or Carnatic singer, I haven't been trained in that. I'm just a guy who likes to sing. I have increasingly been adding a few Indian inflections, a little Desiness to the vocals as well. Because one of the traps that most blues people fall into is trying to sound like the people they're trying to emulate, whose songs they're trying to cover. And this is not just blues. I think this happens in general. I think if you see the Bollywood genre, I think many singers that are even famous today started out trying to mimic. I believe Kumar Sanu, who's legendary 90s singer, was essentially a Kishore Kumar stylist when he started out.
Right.
That happens, right? You're so enamored, you're so much in love with this kind of, So when I started, I was trying to make these sounds that were like Muddy Waters or Howling Wolf, except those guys have such unique voices, like generationally unique. It took me a few years to realize no matter how many contortions and you make, it's not going to be that. So the reality, the Desiness is my Desi voice presenting this song that I really love. And that's really what I'm always headed towards, I think, and I hope. In reflecting my Desiness, I'm trying to do the best with present my best Desiness through this music.
Let me ask you this, because in a way, you're someone whose art and career don't really have a reference point, right? And in the same way, let's take it off stage for a second, because if you think about what you do, what you're doing, and I've been to a show of yours and I enjoyed it thoroughly. What lessons about yourself have you learned, or even have had to unlearn from taking this approach of letting your Desiness speak for itself, getting up on stage and sort of just being yourself, and yet performing an art form that, again, doesn't really have a frame of reference in the style that, in a way, you've created?
There's a lot of lessons. Again, too many lessons.
Right.
One lesson, let me say, when you say lessons and learn, sometimes it's like, I used to think this and now I think that. One of the lessons I've learned is I was kind of right in my approach, at least in the sense that I feel good about my approach and have for a long time. And the part where I invested heavily in the traditional side of it, or at least being in love with it and trying to understand the nuances of the way it has been done traditionally or presented traditionally, I think that has served me well. Because no matter what other kind of music I bring in to my performances, even if it's country or whatever, that little attachment I have musically to the blues world has always existed. And so most people that watch me perform, they very quickly realize that that's where I'm coming from. This is a blues person, or somebody that wants to really present this genre truly, that's performing in front of them. So that's a good lesson I learned is, hey, I was kind of right, because I feel good about it, and you really kind of want to feel good about it. The other lesson that I've learned, and I keep learning this, is making assumptions about the audience. This is a tricky one, especially now that I've ventured for the last almost decade into the Bollywood blues world, which is, again, like you said, there's no point of reference. I just made this one up.
Right.
So if you're in Berkeley and you're presenting to a mixed audience, what do you start with? Do you start with a blues song? Do you start with an instrumental that's kind of neutral, that doesn't kind of hint this way or that? Do you start straight up with a Bollywood song? Do you say, oh no, here's a blues song, but it's mine in Hindi? Or do you say, screw all that, do I start with an old country, George Jones song? Right. Now, I could sit here and hyper-analyze. I could look at the audience and go, okay, we're 60% this and 40% that.
Yeah.
I've just the lesson I've learned over the years is to forget all of that and just go and do what I'm feeling in that particular moment. And almost always the audience just comes along because they're there for the ride.
Yeah. And what would you say in that same way that, like, a lesson you learned is not to necessarily assume and not to necessarily try and analyze and just kind of go with it and do with what's in your heart, because the blues is your anchor, right? I mean, that's your kind of compass here. So in a way, for audiences, especially those who are learning about this and they're kind of now getting to know this very creative, unique style that you said you've created and you're creating as you speak, what are they most surprised by? Especially, after they've experienced one of your shows. I mean, they come up to you and they must tell you, like, hey, we loved your show. And what for them is probably, do you think, is probably the most surprising, or the aha moments that they might feel?
The way in which me, and not just me, my band, and you saw my band in action as well, and these are stellar musicians. I'm really proud to be associated with all of them. The ease with which the band pivots and just goes from Mukesh or Mohammed Rafi right into muddy waters, and there's not even a second's worth of hesitation, and it all musically works. That part is almost mind-blowing to people because they've never witnessed that. And the other thing that's surprising to Desi people, and this I chuckle about all the time because I'm from Mumbai. Hindi bol sakta hu, Marathi bol bolta hu. I'm Desi, pakka Desi, born and raised in Mumbai. But I stand on these stages and I'm singing Louisiana blues, and they think and they assume I'm somebody that was born and raised here, and kind of almost forced myself to learn these songs. I've had people, Desis, come up, watch a whole show, almost an hour of me singing in Hindi, come up and compliment me on my Hindi, saying, well, it must have taken you a long time to get all of this, your accent right. And then I respond to them in Hindi that's better than theirs, and then they're shocked by what happened, right? So those are the beautiful moments where you almost did like a magic trick and blew the audience's mind without even really trying. And I think that's kind of like the fun part that people appreciate.
Yeah. No, of course. And I think that's always, it's a great way to debunk myths. And it's another, it's a surprise. And like you said, it's sort of a magical, I like that word. It's a magic moment for many people. I thought about kind of how I reacted and what my feelings were after the show. And I was really, quite amazed with that great fluidity between going from a Bollywood song, a Mukesh song or a Rafi song, straight into, a very traditional, blues song as well. And in that way, a lot of blues music is about yearning and sorrow, or, some kind of fiery anger, and those kinds of expressions. And so how does blues music for you make you, in fact, feel complete and whole and joyful and peaceful, especially with themes that are really not necessarily always about joy and peace?
Yeah. Well, I think just having the outlet and just having this conduit, this way for you to channel those specific emotions you talk, which are not necessarily joy and peace. Because if you're joyful and peaceful, you don't need an outlet. You're just feeling content. It's like you've
Yeah.
had a good meal and then there's nothing else to do. You just take a nap. But if you're
Right.
feeling a little agitated, there's some turmoil, inner turmoil. 10 times out of 10, it's good to have a positive way
Uh,
to vent,
yeah.
right? And I couldn't think of a better way of expression than music. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of musicians, especially live performers, would agree with me that a lot of their just pure mental sanity is associated with having this platform where they can express their deepest emotions. Sometimes even, and often even through the words of somebody else, but you're still, presenting a part of yourself through it. And
Yeah.
so those emotions come out. Uh, if I'm singing a Slim Harpo song about lost love, maybe I'm singing about my lost love. Who knows?
Yeah.
In the back of my head. And it
Yeah.
really helps. It keeps you emotionally, don't want to speak for him, it keeps me emotionally stable most nights. And I really appreciate that.
Let me ask you something. I feel like art is definitely an expression of our truths. And so when you're up on stage, I mean, two parts of this one. The first one is, does blues, and particularly melding that with your background as a Desi artist, does that reflect sort of a mirror of who you are? Or is it a window into something else that
Oh,
you're discovering?
well, it's both, I suppose. I mean, the
Yeah,
mirror part is true,
yeah,
and I'm trying to be as honest as I am when I'm on stage, and I
sure.
hope you felt that. I have
I did.
over
Yeah,
the years, I've tried to take away any pretense, any veneer. You're getting really the latest point, whatever version of me on stage,
right.
and as
Yeah,
truly as I can present it. It's not necessarily the complete picture at all times. So there's a
uh,
window part, and some of that
yeah,
completeness I'm still discovering within myself. Yes. So for instance, on the New Year's Eve show, you didn't hear a lot of the political songs that I have. That's
yeah,
not a side I presented. That's a
yeah.
whole other aspect, and that has its own results and impact on the audience. That said, yes, it is. It's a reflection of me, who I am in the moment, and my journey,
Mm, yeah,
especially in this country, and as a kind of a mixed culture person at this point. Like I
right.
couldn't be pinned down. I mean, I'll always be Desi. Once you're Desi, you're Desi. You're born and raised Indian. That's never going away. But
Yeah.
what type of American, what level of American am I? That's
Mm.
always
That's the
evolving.
journey.
That's the journey, and that's always what's also being presented.
Do you feel most at home on stage singing the blues? Or is it like a blend that you have to curate? Meaning, hey, yes, I just sang four blues, hard, traditional blues songs in a row. Man, I'm craving something, Bollywood. Do you feel like that at times? I mean, like, is that going to naturally happen? But in a way, is this new style or is this craft that you've created, is that what's home for you?
It is home, but it doesn't mean that I don't just love to play 4 hours of straight blues, which I still do.
Yeah,
In fact,
yeah,
I just kind of just manufactured a new band very recently just so I could do that, so that I don't have to have this pressure of performing this incredible array of subgenres as Aki
uh,
Kumar. And I
yeah,
wanted to kind of go back to just playing the blues that I kind of started out doing. So I have this
yeah.
other incarnation that I'll be performing under here and there at smaller clubs,
Hmm.
so that I can just do what you just described, just play four blues songs and then play four more blues songs.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's really me on autopilot, musically
Hmm.
speaking. That doesn't mean that any of this Bollywood music isn't natural to me, because the songs, especially the ones you've heard, these were not sent to me as suggestions. I mean, they're all classics and people love them and they do request them, but the
Yeah.
song selections are mine because they are near and dear to my heart. And so that is just as natural for me. It's just that it's taken a little time to bring that into this blues space. I mean, it's a really bizarre thing if you think about it, to
Sure.
have a bunch of American guys who never grew up on this music be so good at it. It's taken 10 years for me to work with these folks and
Yeah.
even have them buy into it a little bit. And now they're fluent at it. So
Yeah.
that's the only reason I'd say that I don't just do a whole Bollywood show and go, oh, this is me in my natural state, because
Yeah.
it's taken a lot more work to build up
Sure.
to that. The blues, everybody knows how to play it in this blues scene, especially. So if I find a good blues band, I'm playing blues.
Yeah. No, and I love that in the sense that, like, home doesn't have to always mean one thing. And, it's a great way for you to also explore and see other conduits that you mentioned. When I saw you perform, you were hearkening back on, the first song you ever wrote, and then also playing some new stuff and thinking about, a forthcoming album this year. Tell me now, and I'll try and get you out of here on this. Tell me, what are you optimistic about? What are you hopeful for in 25? And what can some of your audiences kind of look forward to now as these expressions evolve, as your journey continues?
For me personally, I'm feeling very joyful about the album that you mentioned because it was recorded, engineered, mixed entirely here in the garage behind me here at home. And
Yeah.
so, in a sense, it's kind of like this manifestation of this little tiny ambition I had during the pandemic years, being stuck in that garage, just not having the opportunity to perform live, where I learned how to do a little bit of audio engineering at home. This album has finally happened,
Yeah.
and it's really a blues album plus, as opposed to the Bollywood blues albums I've put out in the past. So there is this feeling of like a completion, like almost, like I've been waiting to do this and it's done. So it should be out this year, and I'm feeling very hopeful about that, and positive about that. Um, and I think generally speaking, without getting too specific, 2025 can feel like it's going to be bleak to
Mm.
many of us. But I just get the sense, especially here in the Bay Area and in the arts community, that people are just there's like a fire inside them
Yeah.
that has been lit, and that's going to be going strong and for a long time. So you're going to see a lot of solidarity amongst the musicians, and especially in the blues community and the artistic community. And I'm looking forward to that, and that's going to get us all through to the end of the year feeling good, I hope. So that's what
Dial.
yeah, that's my hope.
Yeah. No, can't wait. And I mean, whether it's making people feel that fire and helping them live through your music and sort of see themselves in that music, but then also feeling complete and really getting to experience your art, I'm sure they're going to be very grateful for it. Aki, thank you so much for joining us. This was a real treat of a conversation, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. I had a great time. Thank you for having me.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Stay tuned.